Good morning, everybody. My name is Brent Lopez. I'm the manager of Children's Book World in Los Angeles, where we celebrate diversity, knowledge, and enrichment. It is a world where every child sees themselves on our bookshelves. And I am so very excited to be here because I am with one of the greatest writers of children's literature, Kate DiCamillo. Kate, I'm sorry, I had to say it.
You're
Uh,
embarrassing me. Ben, come on. Yeah.
I think Kate is an alchemist. What is an alchemist? Well, an alchemist has the power and the skill to take simple things, in this case, words, and honest feelings, and manifest and create a treasure greater than its parts. And that's what I think you choose to do with your creativity and artistry. You share it with the world, and it is a really wonderful thing. Your newest book is, I believe, one of your most magical books. I just really, really love The Puppets of Spelhorst.
Oh, Brent, thank you. You're making me tear up a little bit. So I'm just so grateful to get to be a part of stories and storytelling and to talk with people who love books as much as I do. So thank you for talking with me.
Oh, you're welcome. Kate DiCamillo, for those of you who may not know, you may just be starting your journey with Kate DiCamillo books, but she is one of America's most beloved storytellers. She was the former national ambassador for young people's literature, which is a great job held by some of the best people ever, good friends, and a two-time Newbery medalist. Born in Philadelphia, you grew up in Florida, now you live in Minneapolis. And your many beloved books include The Beatrice Prophecy, Because of Winn-Dixie, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, another book about inanimate objects with inanimate life, and right?
Very true. Yeah.
The Tale of Despero, and many more. This book was also illustrated by Julie Morstad, who is an incredible illustrator of numerous acclaimed books for young readers, including The House of Dreams, When the Green Becomes Tomatoes, and Swan, The Life and Dance of Anna Pavlova. Was it really fun to work with Julie on this? Did you get to work with her at all?
Well, it goes as it always goes. I have yet to meet her. I have not talked with her. What I got to do with this was watch as this art came in and just like be bowled over by it because it is like a dream. And it's art that like this is the wonderful thing that happens when somebody illustrates a book. Um, it feels like the story now has nothing to do with me. It is entirely this magical thing because of this art that I can just come into as an 8-year-old and read myself. Does that make sense?
It
It,
makes complete sense.
it's just like all of her art makes so much magic that I forget that I had anything to do with this story and I just fall into it as a reader. So it's a
Yeah.
gift.
Well, powerful art like that in a book, even if it's small illustrations in a traditional narrative book, chapter book, can open a window for some readers into the world of the book,
Yep.
where they may not have access in other ways. That can be very helpful.
Yep, absolutely. It's a window and it's a door and it's a magic wand that makes the words brighter and more meaningful.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about doing a graphic novel?
I would like to do a graphic novel. When I did Flora and Ulysses, and I wrote that as straight text, and then we backed some of it out to turn when the squirrel did super heroic things. We turned that into like a comic strip. And I thought then, oh, it's kind of like it would be like writing a screenplay to do it. And I thought that would be really fun. So sure, I have many dreams, and that is one of them to do a graphic novel.
I love all your dreams because we get to be part of them frequently. About every 2 years or every year, we get to be part of another of your dreams. Well, why don't you tell the kids about your book? I'm going to move off screen for a second here.
Okay. So the Puppets of Spellhorst started for me with going over to a friend's house, and actually, I have this great visual that I can show you. She's an artist, and in her workroom, she had um, this puppet up on the shelf. It was hers when she was a kid. As you can see, it's a wolf puppet, and you can see that the wolf has got very sharp teeth, and this owl puppet. And these puppets, I saw them and they seemed full of magic to me. And I said to her, I feel like there's a story with those puppets. Would you be okay if I borrowed them for a while? And she said, sure. So I took them home. I put them in my office. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I would look at them. I knew there was something there. It took a long time for the words of the story to show up. And once I had the beginning words, which I'm going to read to you later on, then I knew that I was in because I had the voice of the story. And this is how it always is for me, is just like people ask me, where do the story ideas come from? And then also, do you outline the story as you're writing it? And the story ideas come from everywhere. And that I also have here today to show you. This is my notebook.
I love it.
When I got those puppets and put them in the office, they were in the office looking at me all the time. But also, I wrote down in the back of this notebook where I keep a running list of story ideas. I wrote down owl puppet, wolf puppet. And so anything that I think I can turn into a story goes into the notebook. And the notebook is always with me because it's a reminder to like keep everything open, my eyes and my ears and my heart and my brain, everything, to pay attention to everything and to be open to everything. And that's kind of where the stories come from. But do I outline? I don't. So all I know is I have these puppets. There's going to be a wolf puppet and an owl puppet, but I don't know what's going to happen. I have to find the voice of the story. And then I follow the voice and the characters through the story. So that's where this all started, with the owl and the wolf.
Before we start talking about it, can we have you read the introduction, the prologue to this book? I want to go and focus this in so people can see it.
Yeah, and I'll put my glasses on for that. I'd love to do that. Because this goes right into that thing where it's just like, as soon as I had these words, then I had my way into the story. And I think that that will be clear when I read. So it begins long ago in a land called Norendi. The Puppets of Spelhorst.
You want to talk about your acknowledgments?
I would love to do that. Mine says, for Ann Patchett, who listened clear-eyed from beginning to end. Ann is a wonderful writer who writes books for adults and also some picture books for kids. And when I was working on this story, I went to visit her and I had a complete draft, and we sat up late one night and I read the whole thing out loud to her. And it is exactly as I say in that dedication. She listened clear-eyed from beginning to end, and told me what was missing and what needed to happen. And I listened to her. And this is her book, because she's such a good listener.
That is really wonderful. And boy, we're going to talk about it, but this book is a book that, like the King, commands itself to be read out loud.
Okay, it begins this way. Once there was a king and a wolf and a girl with a shepherd's crook and a boy with arrows and a bow. And also there was an owl. The king had a beard made of human hair. The wolf's teeth were bared in a snarl. The girl wore a green cloak. The arrows in the boy's quiver were sharp enough to prick a finger. As for the owl, his feathers were real.
Look at that wonderful picture.
That is so fabulous.
And we see all of the puppets there.
The king and the wolf and the girl and the boy and the owl lay jumbled together at the bottom of a trunk that had the word Spellhorst stenciled in gold letters on its lid and sides. The king and the wolf and the girl and the boy and the owl, puppets. And they were waiting for a story to begin. Act 1, which is where we'll leave you, hoping that you want to go on. Hey, Bryn, I want to say something else about the that notebook and the fact that the wolf and the owl were in there. But the other thing that was in there and that I knew was a story idea and I didn't know how I would use it was the word Spellhorst. I don't know where it came from. It popped into my head one day. I wrote it down in the notebook. And so when I finally have the beginning of this voice for the puppets, and I'm like, okay, it's going to be a fairy tale. I can feel the rhythm of it. And then that word that I have been carrying around in my notebook, Spellhorst, for forever, it's like, oh, this is where it belongs. And that word belongs to, you'll find that when you read this book, belongs to the old sea captain. But it's just like, I didn't know any of that. I just knew that there was magic in the word Spellhorst and that there was magic in the owl and the wolf.
Well, there is the magic in particular words that they can manifest things for you, and it clearly did that. But did you ever figure out where that word came upon you, or did it? No.
No. And this is the other reason that anytime I talk about writing, I always come back to that notebook for that very thing, because when something like that goes through your head, so it's not only what you see and what you hear, but it's also your own internal voice. And that word just popped into my head one day as I was, just walking around minding my own business, had the notebook, wrote it down, carried it around until I figured out it belonged to the puppets.
Right now, around the country, we're all talking about the ability for everyone to have access to all books and the freedom to read. But I want to talk about another aspect, which is the freedom to write.
Yeah.
And you have explored so many different genres and feelings of books and types of books and types of characters. But is there a limit for you, or is that part of the fun of writing, is that you have the freedom to be able to write what you want when you want it?
What a beautiful way to talk about it, because it is that whole thing where everywhere I go, that's what we talk about is we need to, every kid, every adult, every person needs to be able to find themselves in a book. And that's what's so dangerous about keeping books away from readers, is that people cannot find themselves and they can't figure out who they are in the world without seeing themselves in the book or seeing who they can become. But to talk about the freedom to write what you need to write is a beautiful way to come at that, because it does the same thing. Telling a story helps me figure out who I am, helps me see myself better, helps me see the world better and other people in the world better. It helps me look better at the world, and it helps my heart look better at the world. So yes, we need that freedom to tell the kind of story that we need to tell. And you're right, I've gone all over the place. I've gone from pigs who love toast with a great deal of butter, and that's the only thing that they care about.
That's true. I don't blame them. I have those moments.
to small mice who have been given impossible tasks and are able to rise to the occasion. That freedom for me to tell the kind of story that my heart needs to tell, who's given that to me. It's readers, because readers come with me wherever I go. And so I feel so grateful for all those readers who say, yes, please tell us the story of a pig who loves toast with a great deal of butter. We'll read it. Or yes, please, I want to read about a dog who finds their way into a grocery store and then changes everybody's lives by doing that. So um, I just want to say thank you to all you readers for letting
Yeah.
me write.
It's so interesting hearing you say about the writing to be able to allow character or readers to be able to see themselves in the story and see themselves in the book, because really that is the central part of this book. The puppets exist in a world where they only see just a little sliver of the world, but
Yes.
they're desperate to be able to find their place in the story, their role in the community, in the world, and that's sort of the journey that they go on. And it's a perfect metaphor for what we're fighting for, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting because you and I were talking about this before we started the show, as it
Hmm.
were, and it's I when I'm writing a story, I always feel like my job is to get out of my own way. That the story is smarter than I am. That the characters are smarter than I am, and it's a scary way to write because I don't know what's going to happen. But it also puts me in this wonderful place that by the time the book is out in the world, am, along with the reader, still figuring out what it's about, and to talk to somebody who has read it and can help me see the themes in it, which I'm not aware of as I'm working, is really meaningful to me. And I can see that just in this short back and forth that we've had about um, there's fate in here and
Hmm.
destiny and answering for who you are, and there's community, and there's we don't want to give anything away that happens by the end, but there's
Hmm.
also this thing of realizing that you can change your fate if you want to. And I won't, you know what I'm talking about, Brimjo.
Yeah.
I won't say that.
No, we don't want to give away any of that, all of those details. Now, it's interesting because this is at a fairy tale, a fable in its own particular way, and one of the things I love about fairy tales and fables, which I think is misunderstood by a lot of the general population, is that they're not happy all the time, and they're not always. They can have humor in them, and they can have adventure and excitement, but there's quite a bit of melancholy or sadness and loss and scary things can happen as well. What draws you to fairy tales and fables?
exactly everything that you just said, because you know that sometimes it's never kids who say this to me, it's adults who say, oh, your book, it's so dark, so and I've never ever heard that from a kid, but it's adults who worry that there might be too much darkness in the stories. And there's darkness in our lives. It's difficult to be a human being in the world, and I feel like stories and fairy tales excel at this. Need to acknowledge how difficult things can be, and this is the other thing that fairy tales excel at. They tell us that we can navigate those difficult things.
Hmm.
It's that quote about I think it's Chesterton. I'm not sure that fairy tales uh, don't tell children that dragons exist. Children already know that. They tell them that dragons can be overcome,
Hmm.
and that's so. It's not only that does the fairy tale acknowledge the darkness; it shows you a way through the darkness.
Absolutely, and this is um, there's along with fairy tale comes certain things that come along with that all the time, and I want to talk about one particular word because the story you've written is spare with very particular words chosen throughout, but we want to talk about the power of one word, and that is the power of once.
Mm.
Why is that such a powerful word?
I don't know, and I bet you if some graduate student were to go back and look through my books, you could pick out how often I use that once. I think of it, I have a visual for some words. Once to me is like a golden doorway that you can step through, right?
Hmm.
So it shows up in Edward Tulane. I use the word once a lot in the tale of Despero. And like I said when we were starting this talk, I could not figure out how to tell the story of these puppets until I had that word. It has power and majesty and promise, and it is just like you're being ushered through a golden doorway is what it feels like to me as a reader and as a writer.
Yeah, I think also as a reader, it allows you to be able to connect the story into your own once, your own
Yes.
past as well, or
Yeah.
experiences. So it can be wonderful. Now, before we get into the great characters, I want to talk about puppets, because
Yeah.
puppets historically are a very powerful tool for politics and personal, to be able to sort of say things that humans can't necessarily say.
That's super interesting. That is very, very true. That's very true.
So why what did you discover about puppets, and why were they a fun part to write about within this particular story?
Well, going back to the very beginning and like, finding these actual physical puppets. And then, as I started to work, where the king, I remembered this that my dad had at one point when he visited brought us these paper mache puppets, and I just like I had totally forgotten that. And as I started to work on this, and of course I grew up in a neighborhood where there were a lot of kids, and so of course we used these puppets to put on a play. And so as I'm working, I'm thinking, ultimately there has to be a play here, but who's going to write the play? And again, we won't give anything away about what happens in the book, but it was interesting because and I think I can say this: two girls show up and discover the puppets, or given the puppets as a gift, and they're the ones that put on a play. And then it gets to that part where you see how much this goes to what you said about how puppets are a vehicle for saying things, how much power there is in getting to be the one who tells the story,
Hmm.
right? And it made me remember what it was like to be a kid and to have those puppets on your hands and to be able to write the story.
That's, it's interesting because now talking about the characters, we have the shepherd girl, the hunting boy with the quiver and the arrows, the wolf, the mean snarly wolf, who's such a great character, the philosophical owl, and the very commanding king,
Yeah.
who are all searching for their story, but the people who help give them a voice to their story, these two sisters, Emma and Martha, and a very delightful character named Jane Widdams, who becomes a central part of the story too. By giving voice to these characters, they change their own lives.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a gorgeous point that you just made. And I felt it kind of knock me sideways a little bit because that goes to my story too, that by and this is the beautiful thing about writing. And I just got back from doing talking to a large amount of third graders in South Dakota, and talking about this, and the power of writing, and that's it right there. you know it
Hmm.
doesn't matter how old you are. When you put pen to paper and tell a story, or write something about yourself, it gives you a certain agency and power, and you can start to change yourself you know
Yeah.
It's a beautiful point, friend. Beautiful.
And as you yourself have said, for you, you can spend years writing a book, but the book is never complete until it's in the hands of the readers and the people who are reading it, right?
Absolutely. It's just like it is. I'm only half the circle. And the thrill of that, the thrill of, and it's also odd. And I think that you and I have talked about this before that even though I don't meet the great majority of people who read the books, we still form a community. I
Hmm.
can, I can feel the completion of that circle when they're reading. It makes me less alone, and it makes the reader less alone too.
One aspect of the book which I thought was very, very interesting and very timely for what is going on today is that with the puppets, each of them is so centered on their own individual feelings and opinions about who they are and what matters to them that it takes precedence over their collective needs and happiness for themselves as a group or as a community. Um, and you have a line, we must all remember that we are in a story together. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I again, it comes back to this thing where the story is smarter than I am, and I hear that line, and it moves me because I think, yes, that's exactly what we all need to remember now, right? We
Hmm.
are all in this together. But I was not aware of the power of that sentence when I was writing because it gets to something deeper than I'm even aware of, and you're exactly right. It's what we all need to remember. And there's a moment when the puppets have been, again, I don't want to give too much away,
Hmm.
been separated. I don't know if you remember this, and the king is on the mantle.
Hmm.
And I wonder if I can find that part. And he's by him. I think the girl is maybe there with him, the girl puppet.
I know there's that moment where they're together and they're communicating, and then there's the moment where he is all by himself, and he has some very really interesting things to say.
Right, and it's just I'm not going to be able to find it. Uh, uh, I found it. Should I read it
Okay,
real quick?
yes, please do, please do.
On the mantle, His Majesty the King had given some thought to his circumstances and had grown quite agitated. How can they be taken away one by one? It does not seem right to me. I command someone to make it different. What kind of different do you want it to be? Said the girl. I want it to be a world where songs are sung every day. I want us to be together. I command the world to be different. Emma is writing a story with all of us in it, said the girl. We will all be together again. I do believe it will happen. I hope so, at least. And that goes to one of the central themes, which is like, uh, uh, as you're pointing out to me, it's that community and how much they need each other and how much they need this story to bring them together and get them out of talking, because the wolf is a very fun character to write because she basically only ever says one thing: my teeth are well and truly sharp. And the owl says a lot of what he thinks are wise things, but just kind of sound pretentious and self-important. And they all are stuck in themselves, and then they realize how much they need each other.
Yeah. And there are moments, they all get moments of joy, which I love too, to explore each of their moments, whether it be flying and well, I don't want to give anything away either, but there are really wonderful moments of joy for each of them, which are very different and unique. I did want to talk about theater and the art of collaboration and mixing up all of those elements because it's a major part of the story in terms of how the uh, Emma and the puppets end up coming together to be able to put on this, and this is a story that demands to be read aloud or performed. I could completely see this as a wonderful stage performance with young people doing that.
The king commands it. Yes.
How do you feel about that, or the theater and story and performance? And have you seen performances of your work before?
I have. So, there are movies, but I've also there's a wonderful uh, adaptation of The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. It became an opera here in Minnesota. The Minnesota Opera put it
Oh
on.
wow.
Yeah, which was just amazing. But also, Dwayne Hartford is a playwright who has turned it into a play that a lot of community theaters have done. And last winter, I got to watch. There are like one act competitions for high schools, one act plays, and some high school and kids had condensed it down to a one act play and Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And I got to go and see them do that, and it was like spectacular. And it's always that thing of like that distance from me having anything to do with it, and I can see so clearly that the story is just itself, and
Hmm.
and it has nothing to do with me. And that is a great grand thing. It was just this thing that passed through me and I got to hold for a while, and now it's out in the world having its own life. And how spectacular would it be if somebody put on a puppet show about the puppets? They would be very thrilled.
Um, Another part of the story that's interesting, and I sort of thinking of you talking about the puppets staring back at you inside your working office, is that the puppets, though they communicate with each other, nobody can hear the puppets. And the puppets are very limited to only be able to see other things by someone else physically moving them. Um, what were the puppets staring at you? Did that inspire you to sort of think about how puppets would respond to the world?
Um, yeah, maybe that's part of it, but it's also like, because, and we had said this at the beginning, it's not super dissimilar from Edward Tulane,
Yeah.
same thing there, cannot speak, and cannot move, and, would have to be put in a position in order to see. And it is a feeling that is very easy for me to access. And I think it's a feeling that a lot of us have had when you feel powerless, absolutely powerless. And it's a feeling that I remember from childhood, and I've had it sometimes in adulthood too. So it is not a big leap of imagination for me to get into that way of like, there's absolutely nothing that you can do. But yet here you are up here, and here you are here with your heart and your mind, and you can dream. And this book is in many ways, I think, a testament to the power of having a dream.
Do you have to set a mood for when you're writing different books in different places?
Huh? I have music that I use for a particular book that I will put on every time I sit down to write it, and and then I can't really listen to that music again because it's so powerfully connected to the book. So that's one way that I get myself into it. The other is by being up really, really early in the morning when it's still dark, and that kind of helps me enter into the story. That it's kind of almost like being in a dream world. Then.
I agree with that. I mean, I've told you before. I like early mornings are a very creative time for me as well. I find that my mind is fresh and I'm able to just sort of experience things, and it also feels like there's less things in your way, visually
Absolutely.
and mentally.
I mean, I could overstate it, but it is this feeling, and it, of like you kind of own the world a little bit at that hour. Nobody else is up. you know,
Mhm.
and so it's not only that nobody is calling you or wants something from you, but it's just like there's this stillness, and that it's a magical time of day, I think.
Um, Now, how long did it take you to write this book?
I'm thinking. It probably was less than a year. I did my traditional, probably rewrote it from beginning to end 6 times, and then it went to my editor, and then I did a couple of rewrites for her. So a little under a year.
Now, do I understand this correctly? Because I think saw something that the Norendi is the beginning of stories that will be. I'm not exactly sure how that is. You want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So, it's like these stories are. There's going to be a sequence of three fairy tale novellas. This being the first one. They are not linked, but they take place in this world called Narendi, which is like kind of a fairy tale world where, if you squint, you can see how all three of these stories could take place in this kind of like parallel world. And the next one will be out next year, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say the title or not, but whatever. Hopefully, it is magical too. Um,
Oh, I could pretty much bet on that. Now, is that the only series you're working on right now, or are you thinking? Do you have other things in
I've got
percolating?
a novel that's going to come out in March of 2024, and I am working here just quietly in those early morning hours that you and I love on very short fairy tales that I hope will be kind of like loosely interlinked. So that's what's keeping me occupied here.
That's great. I love that you have you're a juggler too. You have many things working creatively up in the air, and then so many, from Mercy Watson to Edward Tulane to Desperate, like all of these wonderful characters. And the Puppets of Spellhorst, I have to say, I just as veteran reader who's read many books, this was something that really touched me deeply, and I really felt it spoke to my place in the world right now. Um, I One final note before as we wrap it up, um, is something again that the king said, the puppet king. I love to quote the puppet king, though he is very officious and commanding at all times. He does make some very strong points. And he, and he has a deep desire for, in his case, he's using the word songs. I'm going to change it to books. A deep desire for books or songs that break your heart and heal it too.
Ah.
And you do that with everything that you create in different ways. What's that about?
Uh, what's it about? Um, it's about stories for me as a way, as a light in a world that is really dark, and those stories help me navigate, and that magic that I feel when it's when we were talking earlier about the readers that I never meet, but that I can feel them reading the story, and us becoming a community. It's it's how we're all brokenhearted, and when we come together in a story or a song like the king wants, um, we're less alone, and we're safe for a short time. And it matters to me a great deal to get to be a part of that as a reader and as a writer.
Well, Kate, I can't tell you enough how appreciative I am to have you here with us today. We have actually, I think, almost 40 schools around the country who
Oh,
are
wow.
actually going to be watching this and being able to. So the number of students is in the thousands. We had people from, I think, 25 different states, in addition to all of our California schools and students who are participating in this talk. So I'm really excited for them to be able to share in this. And also, we want teachers to read this book out loud with their students in the classroom, because I think that there's a power to that. Did you ever work as an educator at all?
No, and I was just gonna like jump right up on stage with you there and say, yes, we want them surely to read this, but we want those teachers, and I know that y'all are doing it. And I just want to say thank you, not just for reading my books, but for that sacred, powerful act of reading out loud to kids. I cannot tell you how much it matters. I cannot tell you how many times I wish that I had thanked my teachers. So all I can do is thank you, and also say this, that I was a kid who grew up in a house filled with books, with a mother who read to me, took me to the library, bought me books, and I felt like, getting read to every day after lunch was one of the most powerful, wonderful things that had ever happened to me. So if it felt like that to me, there is a kid somewhere who is waiting for you to read every day after lunch, and it's saving their life. So I say thank you to you.
It is a
I'll get
door.
down off my soapbox now. So
Oh no, it's a door opener. Real quick, one last thing. So mine was Where the Red Fern Grows. That was the communal read that turned me into like a junkie, avid person for books and stories. And that was a group reading where the entire class was sobbing through that story. Do you remember what book was read when you were one of the books that was read in a classroom when you were young that had that effect on you?
there are so many different ones, and it's funny that I never talk about this one as much as I should, because it was really central to me becoming a writer. Is Harriet the Spy. It
Oh.
is, I mean, like, and isn't it weird that it's just like I've been talking about the books that were read to me and the books that mattered to me, and I forget about that book. And it is basically a primer on how to be a writer, and it is a very subversive book. And I think that was third grade that was read aloud to
Yeah.
me. I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a complicated character.
Right. It is not, it is, there is a lot to talk about there, and I just remember that, like, it's just like you understand, and talk about carrying a notebook around. Harriet carries a notebook around.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Oh, Kate, it is always such a pleasure to be able to speak with you about your books. And I'm so glad to be able to enjoy. The Puppets of Spelhorst is coming out on October 10th, and everyone's going to have an opportunity to be able to read and share this book and do your part in figuring out the final parts of what this story is, because you get to participate with Kate. So thank you so much, Kate. Any last words?
Um, the last words are just this: thank you to you, and thank you to everybody who puts a book in somebody's hands, and thank you to all of you readers. We're in it together.
We really appreciate it. So goodbye, everybody. We'll see you again soon. And I can't wait for you to be able to read The Puppets of Spelhorst. Bye, Kate.
Bye. Thank you.